a condemned man's final hours, a daughter who doesn't know she exists, and a confession so explosive it will shatter everything you thought you knew about family, justice, and the thin line between hero and villain. Sometimes the most dangerous secrets are hidden in the most unlikely places. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and hit the notification bell. This helps us bring you more powerful stories like this one. Death row at San Quentin State Prison was quieter than usual as Raymond "Ghost" Castellanos sat in his cell, counting down his final 18 hours. Tomorrow at 6 p.m., the state of California would execute him by lethal injection for the murder of 3 federal agents during a drug bust gone wrong. After 15 years on death row, his appeals had run out. But Raymond wasn't thinking about his impending death. He was staring at a newspaper clipping he'd kept hidden for 23 years, a small article about a rookie police officer who'd graduated top of her class from the academy. Officer Maria Santos, 22 years old, daughter of Elena Santos, born in East L.A. His daughter. The child he'd given up to save her from a life like his. Raymond had spent his entire adult life as a member of Los Hermanos, one of the most violent drug cartels on the West Coast. He'd killed, stolen, and destroyed lives in pursuit of money and power. But 23 years ago, he'd made one decision that he'd never regretted: walking away from the woman he loved and the child they'd created together. Elena had been a school teacher, innocent and pure, everything Raymond wasn't. When she told him she was pregnant, he'd faced an impossible choice: stay and drag them into his violent world, or disappear and let them build a clean life without him. He'd chosen to disappear. Elena never knew that her daughter's father was one of the FBI's most wanted fugitives. Castellanos. The guard's voice echoed down the corridor. "You got a visitor." Raymond looked up in surprise. It was 11 p.m., well past normal visiting hours. He'd already said goodbye to his lawyer and the priest. Who could possibly want to see him now? "Who is it?" "Says she's Officer Maria Santos, LAPD. Claims it's official business." Raymond's blood turned to ice. Maria. His daughter was here, 18 hours before his execution, and she had no idea who he really was. As they escorted him to the visitor room, Raymond's mind raced. Why was Maria here? What kind of official business could a patrol officer have with a condemned cartel leader? And most importantly, how could he look into the eyes of the daughter he'd abandoned without destroying the last shred of dignity he had left? The visiting room was stark and sterile, divided by reinforced glass with communication through phones. On the other side sat a young woman in an LAPD uniform who looked exactly like Elena had 23 years ago. The same dark eyes, the same determined expression, the same inner strength that had first attracted him to her mother. "Mr. Castellanos," Maria said as she picked up the phone, "I'm Officer Santos. I need to ask you some questions about the Herrera drug operation." Raymond stared at his daughter through the glass, seeing Elena's face but hearing a voice he'd never heard before. Why would LAPD be interested in something that happened 15 years ago? "Because we have reason to believe the Herrera cartel is still active, and that your testimony could help us prevent future violence." Maria's voice was professional, but Raymond could see the intensity in her eyes. 3 officers were killed in your final operation. We think the same people are planning something similar." Raymond felt his world shifting. His daughter was a police officer investigating the very crimes that had put him on death row. The irony was so complete it was almost cosmic. "Officer Santos," Raymond said carefully, "what makes you think I would cooperate with law enforcement? I've been on death row for 15 years. Why would I help the system that's about to execute me?" Maria leaned forward, and Raymond saw something in her expression that reminded him of Elena when she was fighting for her students' futures. "Because," Maria said quietly, "sometimes doing the right thing matters more than personal revenge. And because I think there's more to your story than what came out at trial." Raymond stared at his daughter, this strong, determined woman who'd chosen to serve and protect, despite growing up without a father. She'd become everything he'd hoped she would be, everything he could never be. "What do you want to know?" he asked. "I want to know the truth about what happened that night. All of it. Not the version that got you convicted, but what really happened." Raymond looked into Maria's eyes and made a decision that would change both their lives forever. In 18 hours, he would be dead. But maybe, in his final confession, he could give his daughter something he'd never been able to give her before. The truth. Maria Santos opened her notepad and activated a small recording device, completely unaware that she was about to interview her own father. Mr. Castellanos, let's start with the night of March 15, 2009. 3 federal agents died during a raid on your operation. Walk me through what happened. Raymond studied his daughter's face, seeing Elena's determination mixed with something else, a hunger for justice that spoke of personal motivation. Officer Santos, why is this case important to you personally? You would have been a child when it happened. Maria's expression flickered slightly. Let's just say I have reasons to want the truth about cartel violence in East LA. Raymond felt his heart break a little more. His daughter was investigating cartel activity in the same neighborhood where she'd grown up, probably trying to protect the community that had raised her. The raid was supposed to be a simple drug bust, Raymond began. Federal agents had been tracking our operation for months. What they didn't know was that we'd been expecting them. You had advance warning. We had someone inside law enforcement feeding us information. Someone who'd been taking money from Los Hermanos for years. Maria leaned forward with interest. This wasn't in any of the official reports she'd read. Who was the corrupt agent? Raymond hesitated. The information he was about to share would expose corruption that went to the highest levels of federal law enforcement. But looking at Maria's earnest face, he decided the truth was more important than protecting the reputation of dead criminals. Agent Marcus Webb, DEA. He'd been on Los Hermanos' payroll for 3 years. But that night, something went wrong. What went wrong? Webb warned us about the raid, but he didn't know that the team had been changed at the last minute. Instead of the corrupt agents he'd been working with, they sent clean agents who couldn't be bought. Maria scribbled notes furiously. So you were prepared for agents you could control, but instead faced honest federal agents. Exactly. And when my men realized they couldn't bribe or intimidate these agents, they panicked and started shooting. Raymond paused, remembering that night, the chaos, the gunfire, the moment when everything went wrong. Officer Santos, what I'm about to tell you never came out at trial because my lawyer was afraid it would make my sentence worse. What? I didn't kill those agents. I tried to stop my men from killing them. Maria looked up from her notes, studying Raymond's face. Why would you try to protect federal agents? Raymond felt tears threatening for the first time in 15 years. Because I'd recently learned that violence has consequences that go far beyond the immediate targets. Because I'd realized that every person we killed had families, people who loved them, children who would grow up without fathers. What changed your mind about violence? Raymond looked directly into his daughter's eyes. I became a father. The simple statement hung in the air between them. Maria's pen stopped moving. You have children. I had a child. A daughter. But I gave her up because I realized that being associated with me would destroy her life. Where is she now? Raymond smiled sadly. She became everything I hoped she would become. Strong, honest, dedicated to protecting innocent people. Everything I could never be. Maria was quiet for a long moment, studying Raymond's face. Mr. Castellanos, if you tried to stop the killings, why were you convicted? Because by the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. 3 good men were dead, and I was the leader of the organization responsible. Legally, I was guilty of felony murder even if I didn't pull the trigger. But you've spent 15 years on death row for murders you tried to prevent? I've spent 15 years paying for a lifetime of choices that led to that moment. The specific details of that night matter less than the fact that my decisions created the situation where good men died. Maria looked at Raymond with something approaching respect. That's not the attitude of a typical career criminal. I'm not a typical career criminal, Officer Santos. I'm a man who made terrible choices but tried to do one thing right at the end. What was that one thing? Raymond's voice became soft, paternal. I made sure my daughter would never know that her father was a killer. I made sure she could grow up believing in justice, in law enforcement, in the possibility that good people could make a difference in the world. Maria stared at Raymond through the glass, and for the first time, she seemed to see him as more than just another condemned criminal. Mr. Castellanos, tomorrow you're going to be executed for crimes you say you tried to prevent. Do you regret the choices that brought you here? Raymond looked at his daughter, this strong, brave woman who dedicated her life to serving others, and smiled. Officer Santos, looking at the person my daughter became, I regret nothing about the choice to walk away from her life. Some sacrifices are worth making. Maria tilted her head slightly. How do you know what your daughter became? You said you gave her up. Raymond realized he'd revealed too much. In 6 hours, he would be dead, and his secret would die with him. But maybe it was time for the truth. Because, Raymond said quietly, I've been watching over her from a distance for 23 years, and I'm prouder of her than any father has ever been of any daughter. Maria felt something shift in the atmosphere of the visiting room. Raymond's words carried an emotional weight that went beyond the typical interview dynamic. Mr. Castellanos, you've been watching your daughter for 23 years? How is that possible from death row? Raymond smiled sadly. Officer Santos, when you love someone more than your own life, you find ways to stay connected. Prison libraries have computers now. Public records are accessible online. Newspaper archives, graduation announcements, police academy graduations. It's amazing what a father can learn about his daughter if he's determined enough. Maria's pen stopped moving entirely. Something about Raymond's tone, the way he spoke about his daughter, was triggering recognition she couldn't quite place. What's your daughter's name? Raymond hesitated. He was 18 hours from death, and the secret he'd kept for 23 years was begging to be revealed. Her name is Maria, he said quietly. Maria's blood turned cold. That's my name. I know. The silence in the visiting room stretched for what felt like eternity. Maria stared at Raymond through the reinforced glass, her mind racing through implications she didn't want to accept. Mr. Castellanos, what was your daughter's mother's name? Elena Santos. She was a third-grade teacher at Roosevelt Elementary in East L.A. The most beautiful, kind, intelligent woman I ever met. Maria felt the world tilting around her. Elena Santos was her mother's name. Roosevelt Elementary was where her mother had taught before Maria was born. That's impossible, Maria whispered. Your birthday is October 12, 2001. You were born at L.A. General Hospital at 3:47 a.m. after 18 hours of labor. Your mother was alone because she told everyone your father had died in a car accident. Maria's hands began trembling. Those details weren't in any public record. How do you know that? Because I was outside the hospital that night. I couldn't be there for your birth, but I couldn't stay away completely. I watched through the window as Elena held you for the first time. Maria felt tears beginning to form. You're saying you're my father? I'm saying I'm the man who gave you life and then walked away to make sure you could have a good one. The revelation hit Maria like a physical blow. The condemned cartel leader she'd come to interview was the father she'd never known, the man her mother had told her died when Maria was a baby. Mom said you died in a car accident. Your mother told you that because I asked her to. It was easier than explaining that your father was a criminal who didn't want to destroy your future. Maria looked at Raymond with new eyes, seeing not just a condemned killer but the man who'd shaped her entire life through his absence. You've been watching me my whole life. Every graduation, every achievement, every newspaper article about Officer Maria Santos making a difference in her community. I have a scrapbook in my cell with every public record of your success. Why didn't you ever contact me? Because contact would have meant revealing who I was, and that knowledge would have destroyed everything you'd worked to build. How do you think it would affect a police officer's career if people knew her father was Raymond Castellanos? Maria realized the horrible irony of the situation. She'd become a police officer partly to honor her dead father's memory, not knowing her real father was one of law enforcement's most wanted criminals. Does Mom know you're still alive? Elena knows. I called her when I was first arrested 15 years ago. I wanted her to prepare you in case the truth came out during the trial. She's known for 15 years and never told me? She's known for 15 years and respected my decision to stay out of your life. Your mother is a remarkable woman who understood that some secrets are kept out of love, not deception. Maria felt her entire identity shifting. Everything she'd believed about her family, her motivation for becoming a police officer, her sense of justice, all of it was based on a lie. I became a cop because I wanted to honor my father's memory. I thought you were a hero who died serving others." Raymond's eyes filled with tears. "Maria, you did honor your father's memory. Not the fantasy father your mother created, but the real father who loved you enough to disappear so you could become everything you were meant to be. How is this honoring your memory? You're a criminal." "I'm a criminal who made one good decision in his entire life. I chose to love you more than I loved myself. And looking at the woman you've become, that decision was the only thing I ever did right." Maria stared at her father through the glass, trying to reconcile the man she was seeing with the monster she'd expected to interview. "Tomorrow you're going to be executed, and I'm just finding out you exist. Tomorrow I'm going to die knowing that my daughter became a police officer who protects innocent people from men like me. That's not a tragedy, Maria. That's the greatest victory any father could ask for." Maria sat in stunned silence, trying to process the emotional earthquake that had just shattered her understanding of everything. The father she'd mourned her entire life was sitting 3 feet away, separated by bulletproof glass and 23 years of carefully constructed lies. I need to call my mother," Maria said, reaching for her phone. "Maria, wait." Raymond's voice carried gentle authority. "Before you call Elena, there are things you need to know. Things that will help you understand why we made the choices we did." Maria's hand froze on her phone. "What things?" "Your mother didn't just agree to tell you I was dead. She fought me on it for months. Elena wanted to find a way for us to be a family despite my criminal life." "Why didn't you let her?" "Because 3 weeks before you were born, the Morales family was murdered." Maria felt ice form in her stomach. She knew the Morales case. It was legendary in LAPD history. An entire family had been executed because the father had been an informant against Los Hermanos. The Morales murder was connected to you? Diego Morales had been feeding information to the DEA about our operations. When we discovered his betrayal, the cartel ordered his elimination. Not just him, his wife, his 2 children, his elderly parents. 6 people died because Diego had tried to help law enforcement. Maria stared at her father with growing horror. "You killed an entire family?" "I didn't kill them personally, but I was part of the organization that ordered their deaths. And when I saw what happened, when I saw those children's bodies, I realized what would happen to you and Elena if anyone ever discovered our connection." Raymond's voice grew quiet, haunted. "The Morales children were 8 and 10 years old, Maria. They died because their father had chosen the wrong side in a war between criminals and law enforcement. I couldn't let that happen to you. So you disappeared to protect us." "I disappeared because I realized that associating with me would make you a target for the rest of your life. Not just from rival cartels, but from Los Hermanos members who might someday want leverage against me." Maria began to understand the impossible position her father had faced. Stay and endanger his family, or leave and break their hearts. "Did Mom understand why you left?" "Elena understood, but it nearly destroyed her. 4 months after you were born, she begged me to find a way for us to be together. She said love could overcome any obstacle." "What changed her mind?" Raymond pulled out a yellowed photograph from his pocket, a picture of the Morales family taken before their murder. "I showed her this. I explained that loving me meant your childhood would be spent looking over your shoulder, wondering if today would be the day my enemies came for you." Maria looked at the photo and felt sick. 2 children who looked no older than she would have been, smiling innocently at the camera. Elena finally agreed to the deception when she realized that protecting you was more important than protecting our relationship, Raymond continued. "Your mother chose your safety over her own happiness. How did you stay away? How did you resist the temptation to be part of my life?" "I didn't resist it. I satisfied it in other ways. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone in your life, I found ways to be present without being seen." "What do you mean?" Raymond smiled sadly. "Your 10th birthday party at Griffith Park? I was there, disguised as a park maintenance worker. Your high school graduation? I was in the back row, wearing a custodial uniform. Your police academy graduation? I was one of the catering staff." Maria felt tears streaming down her face. "You were there." "I was there for every important moment of your life, Maria. I just made sure you never knew it." That's why you know so many details about my life that aren't in public records. That's why I know that you're afraid of spiders but love thunderstorms. Why I know you break into tears during sad movies but stay strong in dangerous situations. Why I know you became a police officer because you have an unshakable belief that good people can protect innocent people from evil. Maria sobbed, overcome by the realization that her father had been a hidden presence throughout her entire childhood. How did you watch me without Mom knowing? Elena knew. She always knew when I was there. We had an arrangement. I could observe from a distance, but I could never make contact. She was protecting both of us from the temptation to rebuild our relationship. Did she ever want to tell me the truth? Every day. But we both agreed that the truth would destroy the life we'd worked so hard to build for you. How do you tell a child that her father loves her so much he had to become a stranger? Maria looked at Raymond through the glass, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not a monster, but a man who'd made the ultimate sacrifice for his child. Tomorrow you're going to die, and I'll lose you all over again. Maria, you're not losing me tomorrow. You're finally finding me. For 23 years, you've been mourning a fictional father. Now you get to say goodbye to your real father, a man who's prouder of you than any parent has ever been of any child. What do I do with this information? How do I live with knowing who you really are? Raymond smiled with infinite sadness and infinite love. You live with it the same way you've lived with everything else, Maria. With strength, with integrity, and with the knowledge that you were loved enough to be protected from the worst parts of your father's world. Maria wiped tears from her eyes and looked at Raymond with a mixture of love and anguish. I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. I've told you nothing but truth tonight. Are you really guilty of the murders that put you on death row? Raymond was quiet for a long moment, considering how to answer the question that would define his legacy in his daughter's mind. Legally, yes. I was the leader of Los Hermanos during the operation that resulted in 3 federal agents' deaths. Under felony murder statutes, I'm responsible for those deaths regardless of who pulled the trigger. But did you personally kill those agents? No. And I tried to stop it from happening. Maria leaned forward. Tell me exactly what happened that night. Raymond closed his eyes, returning to the worst night of his life. The DEA raid was supposed to target our warehouse operation. Agent Webb had warned us it was coming, and we'd prepared to surrender without violence. Los Hermanos had been trying to go legitimate, and I'd made it clear that killing federal agents would bring down heat we couldn't survive. What went wrong? Everything. First, the agents who showed up weren't the ones Webb had told us about. Instead of corrupt agents we could pay off, they sent an honest team that couldn't be bought. Second, my Lieutenant Miguel Santos panicked when he realized we couldn't bribe our way out. Maria's head snapped up. Santos. Like my last name. Miguel was Elena's brother. Your uncle. The revelation hit Maria like another emotional bomb. My uncle was in Los Hermanos. Miguel was how I met your mother. He brought me to a family barbecue, thinking I was just another guy from the neighborhood. Elena had no idea I was involved in criminal activity. What happened to Miguel? Miguel died that night, along with the 3 federal agents. When he saw that we couldn't pay off the agents, he started shooting. I tried to stop him, but it was too late. The agents returned fire, and within minutes, 6 men were dead. Maria felt sick. My uncle killed federal agents. Your uncle panicked and made a terrible decision that got himself and 3 good men killed. I was arrested because I was the organization's leader, even though I'd tried to prevent the violence. Why didn't this come out at trial? Because my lawyer advised me that admitting Los Hermanos had corrupt federal agents on payroll would make the government want to execute me even more. They needed someone to blame for the corruption, and I was the obvious target. So you've spent 15 years on death row protecting corrupt federal agents? I've spent 15 years on death row accepting responsibility for creating an organization that attracted corruption and violence. The specific details matter less than the fact that my choices led to good men dying. Maria stared at her father, trying to reconcile the man she was seeing with the monster she'd expected. There's something else, Raymond said quietly. Something I've never told anyone, not even Elena. What? The reason I was trying to go legitimate, the reason I wanted to end the violence, wasn't just because I'd become a father. It was because I'd learned something about one of the federal agents we were supposed to be bribing. What did you learn? Agent Daniel Torres had a daughter exactly your age. When I saw him at a restaurant with his little girl, watching him help her color in a coloring book, I realized that every person we killed was someone's father, someone's husband, someone's son. Raymond's voice broke slightly. I realized that if someone killed me, you would grow up the way Agent Torres' daughter would grow up if we killed him, wondering what happened to Daddy, wondering if he'd loved her enough to stay if he could. So you tried to end the violence. I tried to end the violence, but I was too late. Miguel's panic, the agent's honesty, the chaos of the moment, everything came together in the worst possible way. Maria sat in silence, processing the complexity of her father's situation. He was guilty of creating the circumstances that led to murder, but innocent of the murders themselves. He was a criminal who tried to choose love over violence, but whose past had made redemption impossible. "Dad," she said, using the word for the first time in her life, "are you afraid to die tomorrow?" Raymond smiled through his tears. "Maria, I stopped being afraid to die the moment I saw what kind of woman you'd become. A father's greatest fear is that his child won't have a good life. You've had a good life despite me, not because of me. That's all any father can ask for. I don't want you to die. I don't want to die either. But I've made peace with it because I know my death serves a purpose. It closes the book on Raymond Castellanos so that Maria Santos can continue her life without the shadow of her father's crimes. What if I don't want that? What if I want to fight for you?" Raymond looked at his daughter with infinite love and infinite sadness. "Then you would destroy everything we've worked to build. Maria, your strength comes from believing in justice. Don't compromise that belief to save a man who's already paid the price for his choices." Maria realized that her father was asking her to let him die to preserve her integrity. The ultimate sacrifice, giving up his life to protect her principles. How do I say goodbye to a father I just found? The same way you've said hello to him tonight. With love, with forgiveness, and with pride in what we created together despite never being together. At 2 a.m., 6 hours before Raymond's scheduled execution, Maria made a decision that would change everything. She stood up from her chair in the visiting room and looked at her father through the bulletproof glass. "Dad, I need to leave for a few hours." "Where are you going?" "To find the truth. The whole truth. Not just what happened that night, but what's been covered up for 15 years. Raymond felt alarm rising in his chest. "Maria, don't do anything that will compromise your career or your safety. Please. You said Agent Marcus Webb was feeding information to Los Hermanos. If that's true, there are records. Evidence. Things that could prove your testimony about trying to stop the killings. Maria, Webb died 8 years ago. Even if you found evidence, it wouldn't change my legal guilt. Maybe not. But it might change the narrative. It might prove that Raymond Castellanos wasn't the monster everyone thinks he was." Raymond stood up, pressing his hand against the glass. "Maria, listen to me. In 6 hours, I'm going to die, and you're going to continue being a police officer who makes her community safer. Don't jeopardize that future for a past that can't be changed. You jeopardized your entire life to protect me from your past. Let me jeopardize one night to honor your memory." Before Raymond could protest further, Maria hung up the phone and walked out of the visiting room. Raymond watched through the glass as his daughter disappeared, and for the first time in 15 years, he felt genuine fear, not for himself, but for what Maria might discover. Maria drove through the pre-dawn darkness to LAPD headquarters, her mind racing with possibilities. If Agent Webb had been corrupt, there would be evidence. Financial records, communication logs, internal affairs investigations that had been buried or ignored. At 3 a.m., she used her credentials to access the department's cold case files and federal liaison databases. What she found in the next 3 hours would shock her to her core. Agent Marcus Webb had indeed been under internal investigation at the time of his death. Bank records showed regular deposits that couldn't be explained by his federal salary. Communication intercepts revealed contact with known Los Hermanos associates. Most damning of all, there was a recording of Webb warning someone about the planned raid, a recording that had been suppressed during Raymond's trial. But as Maria dug deeper, she discovered something even more explosive. The recording wasn't just evidence of Webb's corruption. It was evidence that Raymond had been telling the truth about trying to stop the violence. "Miguel, listen to me." Raymond's voice came through 15-year-old audio equipment. "When those agents show up, we surrender peacefully. No weapons, no resistance, no violence. We take the arrest and deal with it through legal channels." "But what if they can't be bought?" Miguel's voice responded. "Then we surrender anyway. I'm not having federal agents' blood on my hands. I've got a daughter now, Miguel. I want her to grow up in a world where good guys and bad guys are clearly defined, not one where everyone's covered in blood." Maria felt tears streaming down her face as she listened to her father trying to prevent the exact violence he'd been executed for causing. The recording continued with Miguel arguing for violent resistance and Raymond repeatedly refusing. The final exchange was heartbreaking. "Miguel, I'm ordering you as your leader. No violence. These agents have families, just like we do. I won't destroy their children's lives the way my father destroyed mine." "And if Miguel doesn't listen to orders," came Webb's voice, "then Miguel will face consequences from me personally. I don't kill federal agents, Webb. I'm trying to get out of this life, not go deeper into it." Maria realized that not only had her father tried to prevent the murders, but he'd specifically tried to prevent them because he was thinking about her. His love for his daughter had motivated his attempt at redemption. But the recording revealed one more crucial detail. Agent Webb had been working both sides. He'd been paid by Los Hermanos to provide information, but he'd also been setting them up for a larger federal operation designed to eliminate the cartel entirely. The raid that night had been a trap. Webb had warned Los Hermanos it was coming, but he'd also ensured that the responding agents would be ones who couldn't be bribed. He'd wanted a violent confrontation that would justify eliminating Los Hermanos' leadership permanently. Raymond hadn't just been framed for murders he'd tried to prevent. He'd been deliberately manipulated into a situation designed to get him killed or imprisoned. At 5:30 a.m., 30 minutes before her father's execution, Maria burst into the warden's office at San Quentin with evidence that could change everything. "I need to stop the execution," she announced, showing her badge and the documents she'd discovered. "Officer Santos, execution stays are handled through the courts, not through local law enforcement. This isn't a request for a stay. This is evidence of prosecutorial misconduct, federal corruption, and the wrongful conviction of an innocent man." The warden looked at the documents Maria had brought: financial records, audio recordings, and internal affairs reports that painted a picture of conspiracy and manipulation. "Officer Santos, even if this evidence is legitimate, there's no time to review it properly before the scheduled execution. Then delay the execution until it can be reviewed." "I don't have authority to do that." Maria looked at her watch. 25 minutes until her father died for crimes he'd tried to prevent, orchestrated by corrupt federal agents who'd used him as a scapegoat. "Then I need to see him one more time. Right now." As Maria was escorted back to the death row visiting area, she realized that even if she couldn't save her father's life, she could give him something equally valuable: the knowledge that the truth had finally been revealed, and that his daughter knew he'd died as a man who'd chosen love over violence. At 5:45 a.m., 15 minutes before Raymond's scheduled execution, Maria sat across from her father in the visiting room, holding the evidence that proved his innocence of the murders that had condemned him. "Dad, I found it. All of it. Webb's corruption, the setup, the recording where you ordered Miguel not to use violence." Raymond stared at his daughter through the glass, seeing Elena's determination mixed with his own stubborn refusal to accept defeat. "Maria, what are you saying?" "I'm saying you were framed. Webb was working both sides, taking money from Los Hermanos while setting you up for a federal trap. He wanted a violent confrontation that would justify eliminating the cartel leadership." Raymond felt emotions he'd buried for 15 years rising to the surface. "You have evidence of this?" "Audio recordings, financial records, internal affairs reports that were suppressed during your trial. Dad, you didn't just try to prevent those murders. You were specifically manipulated into a situation designed to get you killed or imprisoned. Can this evidence stop the execution?" Maria's expression grew grim. "Not in 15 minutes. But it can clear your name posthumously. It can prove that Raymond Castellanos died an innocent man who was destroyed by federal corruption." Raymond looked at his daughter, This remarkable woman who'd spent her last hours of having a father fighting to restore his honor, and felt a peace he'd never experienced. "Maria, that's enough. That's more than enough." "What do you mean?" "I mean I can die knowing that my daughter knows the truth about who I really was. Not the monster the newspapers described, not the killer the prosecutors portrayed, but a man who loved his family enough to try to change." Through the visiting room window, they could see guards preparing for the final phase of the execution protocol. Other death row inmates were being secured in their cells, witnesses were gathering, and the machinery of state-sanctioned death was moving inexorably forward. "Dad, I'm going to spend the rest of my career fighting for other people who've been wrongfully convicted. I'm going to make sure what happened to you doesn't happen to anyone else." Raymond smiled through his tears. "Maria, you're going to spend the rest of your career being the kind of police officer who makes the world safer for innocent people. Don't let my case consume your life. How can I not fight for justice when my own father was denied justice? Because fighting for me would be fighting for the past. Fighting for future victims would be fighting for justice itself." At 5:58 a.m., 2 minutes before the scheduled execution, the warden entered the visiting room with an urgent expression. "Officer Santos, I've reviewed the evidence you brought. While I can't stop today's execution, I can guarantee that this information will be forwarded immediately to the governor's office and the Department of Justice." "What does that mean?" Maria asked. "It means your father's conviction will be reviewed posthumously. If the evidence holds up, Raymond Castellanos will be officially exonerated, and the corrupt federal agents responsible for his wrongful conviction will face justice." Raymond looked at the warden, then at his daughter. "That's all I can ask for." "Mr. Castellanos," the warden continued, "do you have any final words?" Raymond looked directly at Maria through the bulletproof glass, speaking words he'd waited 23 years to say. "My final words are for my daughter. Maria, you are the best thing I ever did in my life. Every choice I made, every sacrifice I accepted, every year I spent away from you was worth it to see the woman you've become. You are proof that love can triumph over violence, that good can emerge from evil, and that some sacrifices create miracles." Maria pressed her hand against the glass, matching her father's gesture on the other side. "Dad, I love you. I forgive you. And I'm proud to be your daughter. And I'm proud to be your father. Take care of your mother. Take care of your community. And remember that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting someone go so they can become who they're meant to be." As guards came to escort Raymond to the execution chamber, he looked at Maria one final time. "Officer Santos, keep making the world safer for innocent people. That's how you honor your father's memory." At 6 a.m., Raymond Castellanos was executed by the state of California. But he died knowing that his daughter knew the truth, and that his sacrifice had created exactly what he'd hoped for, a woman dedicated to protecting others from the violence that had defined his own life. 6 months later, Officer Maria Santos stood before a federal review board that had just officially exonerated Raymond Castellanos posthumously. The evidence she discovered had not only cleared her father's name, but exposed a corruption network that reached into the highest levels of federal law enforcement. "Officer Santos," the board chairman announced, "your investigation has resulted in the reopening of 47 cases involving potential federal corruption. 3 federal agents have been arrested, and your father's conviction has been officially overturned." Maria felt vindicated, but the victory was bittersweet. Raymond had died believing in his daughter's love, but he'd never lived to see his name cleared. "What happens now?" Maria asked. "Now your father receives a formal apology from the federal government, and his case becomes a model for investigating other potential wrongful convictions involving federal corruption." What the board didn't know was that Maria had made a decision that would define the rest of her career. She'd requested a transfer to the LAPD's Cold Case Division, specializing in cases where federal corruption might have influenced local prosecutions. "There's something else," the chairman continued. "The Department of Justice is creating a new position, Federal Corruption Investigator, focused specifically on cases like your father's. They've asked if you'd be interested." Maria smiled, thinking about her father's final words about honoring his memory by protecting innocent people. "I'm very interested." 1 year later, federal investigator Maria Santos had become a legend in law enforcement circles. The woman who'd cleared her own father's name had gone on to expose corruption that had wrongfully convicted dozens of innocent people. But her greatest achievement wasn't professional recognition or career advancement. It was proving that Raymond Castellanos had been right about the power of love and sacrifice. Every case Maria solved, every innocent person she freed, every corrupt official she exposed was a testament to her father's belief that good could emerge from evil if someone was willing to fight for justice. "Elena," Maria said to her mother over dinner one evening, "do you think Dad would be proud of what I've accomplished?" Elena smiled through tears. "Maria, your father was already proud of you before you accomplished anything. He was proud of you for existing, for choosing justice over revenge, for becoming someone who protects others instead of hurting them. Do you regret the lie? All those years of letting me believe he was dead. I regret that your father felt he had to disappear to protect us. But I don't regret protecting you from his world until you were strong enough to understand it." Maria looked at the framed photograph on her mantel, the only picture she had of her parents together, taken before she was born. Raymond and Elena, young and in love, before choices and circumstances tore them apart. "Mom, he made the right choice, didn't he? Leaving us to protect us. Your father made the only choice his love would allow him to make. And look what that choice created, a daughter who's dedicated her life to protecting innocent people from the kind of corruption that destroyed him." Maria reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. A routine interview with a condemned criminal had revealed not just a father she'd never known, but a calling she'd never expected. "I used to think Dad's greatest tragedy was that he died a convicted killer," Maria said. "Now I realize his greatest triumph was that he died knowing his daughter had become everything he'd hoped she would be." Elena reached across the table and took Maria's hand. "Your father's greatest triumph was you, Maria. Everything else was just the price he paid to create that triumph." As Maria continued her work exposing federal corruption and freeing wrongfully convicted prisoners, she carried with her the knowledge that some sacrifices create legacies far greater than the people who make them. Raymond Castellanos had died believing he was a failure who destroyed his family through his choices. But his death had created something unprecedented, a federal investigator whose personal motivation was ensuring that no other family would be destroyed by the kind of corruption that had torn hers apart. The outlaw's final confession hadn't just revealed his daughter's identity. It had revealed the truth about love, sacrifice, and the power of choosing justice over revenge, even when revenge would be easier. And every corrupt official Maria exposed, every innocent person she freed, every family she kept together was proof that sometimes the greatest victories emerge from the deepest losses. This powerful story proves that the strongest family bonds are often forged in separation, and that the greatest acts of love sometimes require the ultimate sacrifice. Raymond Castellanos' final confession didn't just reveal his daughter's identity, it revealed the extraordinary power of a parent's love to shape a child's destiny even across decades of silence. If this story moved you, remember, the most profound influences in our lives often come from people we've never met, sacrifices we never knew were made, and love that operates in silence to protect what matters most. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who choose to disappear so others can shine. Subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and share this with someone who believes that family bonds transcend time, distance, and even death itself. Help us spread stories that prove love finds a way to create miracles, even when those miracles take a lifetime to reveal themselves.